sign the transfer deed or lose everything in court. My uncle did not knock. He walked into my mother's house, the house she died in 6 weeks ago, and slid a document across her kitchen table, like he was closing a business deal. My aunt stood behind him with her arms folded, wearing the same expression she wore at the funeral, somewhere between grief and inventory. My cousin Marcus leaned against the doorframe, scrolling his phone, bored, as if watching someone lose their home was just background noise. I looked at the document. It was a transfer of title deed. My name at the top, my signature line at the bottom, and in the middle, a paragraph transferring full ownership of 14 Elmridge Court, the house my mother spent 22 years paying off to my uncle's name. I looked up at him. He smiled and told me it was what my mother wanted. My name is Claire. I am 31 years old. I work as a forensic document examiner for a regional fraud investigation firm. Every week, companies and law firms pay me to look at paperwork and tell them whether it is real or fabricated. I analyze ink chemistry, signature pressure, paper aging, printer metadata. I find the lies people hide inside legal documents, and I teach courts how to see them. I sat there in my dead mother's kitchen, staring at a deed my uncle wanted me to sign, and I calculated exactly how long it was going to take me to destroy him. I did not sign. I told him I needed time to review it with my own attorney. He leaned forward and told me there was no time. He said the estate needed to be settled, that carrying 2 properties was bleeding the family, that I was being selfish, holding on to a house I couldn't even afford to maintain on my salary. He said my mother had told him, privately, that she wanted the family to benefit from the property, that she had changed her mind about leaving it to just me. I nodded. I said I understood. I asked him to leave the document so I could read it carefully. He left it. They walked out, and the moment that door closed, I put on a pair of nitrile gloves, slipped the deed into a plastic sleeve, and started making calls. To understand why my uncle believed I would simply hand over that house, you need to understand the architecture of my family. My mother was the youngest of 4 siblings. She was also the only one who never asked anyone for anything. She married young, had me at 24, and divorced my father by 26 when she realized the only person who was going to build a life for us was her. She worked as a hospital billing coordinator for 18 years. She drove the same car for 11 of them. She packed her lunch every day. She said no to vacations, said no to new furniture, said no to anything that wasn't a mortgage payment or my tuition. My uncle, her oldest brother, lived differently. He had a nice house in a suburb 40 minutes away. He took cruises. His son Marcus had never worked a job that lasted more than 4 months. They were comfortable in the way that people are comfortable when they consistently borrow from the people around them and call it family. My mother lent my uncle money 3 times that I knew of. Probably more that I didn't. She never asked for it back. She told me once that family meant absorbing the inconveniences of the people you loved. She was not a doormat. She just believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt until you couldn't anymore. She never got to the point where she couldn't. She had a stroke at 61 and died quietly on a Tuesday morning before I could get to the hospital. She left me the house. It was in her will, drafted by her own attorney 8 years ago, signed, witnessed, and filed with the county. I had a copy. Her attorney had a copy. The county had a copy. It was not ambiguous. What my uncle now claimed was that my mother had drafted a second will. A handwritten one, he said. In the last months of her life when she was reconsidering her arrangements. He said she had given it to him for safekeeping. He said it superseded the original because it was more recent. He filed the claim with the probate court 3 days after the deed request. I sat in my car outside the courthouse and looked at the copy they mailed me. It was 2 pages, handwritten in blue ink, signed at the bottom in my mother's name. It left the house and her remaining savings about $40,000 split between my uncle and my aunt. I read it twice. Then I put it in a second plastic sleeve and drove to my office. I have a UV lamp, a microscope, a paper chromatography kit, an ESDA machine for detecting indented writing, and access to a database of ink formulations going back to 1985. I also have 12 years of experience looking at documents that people made to look older than they are. I started with the paper. Aging paper artificially is harder than most people think. You can bake it, expose it to humidity, rub the edges with tea, but the cellulose degradation pattern is different. Real aged paper degrades from the outside in. Artificial aging degrades uniformly. Under a low-power microscope, this document's paper had a uniform stress pattern. The fold lines were recent. The fiber compression was fresh. Then I looked at the ink. The will was dated 14 months ago. I ran a lateral diffusion test on the ink sample I was legally permitted to take from the document during the discovery process. Fresh ink diffuses laterally into paper fibers over time. Ink on a 14-month-old document should show a specific spread radius. This ink showed the spread radius of something written approximately 4 to 8 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago was when my mother died. 5 weeks ago was when my uncle first approached me about the house. I printed my findings in a 12-page analysis report with annotated photographs. I saved it in 4 locations. Then I called my attorney and told her I needed to file a formal fraud objection in the probate proceeding. But I did not show my hand yet. I needed one more thing. If I was going to prove the will was forged, I needed to understand who wrote it. My mother's genuine signature was on file in a dozen places. Her mortgage documents, her tax returns, her original will. I pulled comparison samples of all of them. Her genuine signature had a specific characteristic. The loop on the lowercase l in her last name always closed. It was a habit she'd had since childhood. I had seen her sign her name hundreds of times. The loop always closed. On the forged will, the loop was open. Whoever forged her signature had never watched her write it. They had copied it from a scanned document, where the loop appeared open because of scanning compression. I had the forgery. I had the ink analysis. I had the signature comparison. Now I needed them to commit to the lie under oath. My uncle's attorney filed for an expedited probate hearing. He wanted the new will validated before I could mount a defense. My attorney blocked the emergency motion and pushed for a formal contested hearing with full evidentiary procedure. In the meantime, my uncle escalated. He called me twice. The first time he was measured, almost kind, explaining again that this was what the family needed, that I was being unnecessarily combative about something my mother had clearly wanted. The second time, he was not kind at all. He told me that if I continued fighting this, he would make sure the family knew I had been a financial burden on my mother for years, that she had told him privately she resented paying for my graduate school, that I had been a source of stress she never recovered from. He told me I should be ashamed of myself for dragging her name through a legal proceeding over money. I listened to both calls on speakerphone while taking notes. I thanked him for calling. I told him I just needed a little more time. After I hung up the second time, I opened my laptop and sent a single email to a contact I had worked with twice before. His name was Daniel, and he was a forensic CPA who specialized in estate fraud. I told him I had a case, and I needed him to pull a thread. I sent him my uncle's name, his wife's name, Marcus's name, and asked him to look at any financial connection to my mother over the last 10 years. He called me back in 48 hours. What he found was this. My uncle had borrowed money from my mother 4 times, not 3 as I thought. The total was $63,000. None of it was documented as formal loans. It came out of her savings account in wire transfers labeled with descriptions like family assistance and personal transfer. She never listed it as a receivable. She never asked him to sign anything. She just gave it. The way she gave everything. Quietly and without conditions. There was no record of any of it being repaid. The house was worth approximately $310,000. The savings were $40,000. My uncle stood to receive roughly $175,000 if the forged will was validated. He owed my mother $63,000. He had fabricated legal documents to collect inheritance from a woman he had been draining for a decade. He wasn't grieving his sister. He was collecting a debt he had already spent. I printed Daniel's findings. I added them to the file. I called my attorney and told her we were ready. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in a county probate courtroom. I dressed carefully. Navy blazer, my reading glasses, a leather portfolio. Professional, composed. The exact presentation of someone who does not have to perform credibility because they simply have it. My uncle was already seated when I walked in. He wore a dark suit that looked recently pressed. My aunt sat beside him in black, like she was still at the funeral. Marcus was there too, slouching in the gallery, still on his phone. Their attorney was a polished man in his 60s, who clearly expected this to go quickly. My attorney and I sat at the opposing table. On mine. One file folder, thin and unassuming. The judge asked if both parties were ready to proceed. My uncle's attorney stood and presented the second will. He called it a valid holographic document, properly dated, signed by the decedent, in the presence of witnesses my uncle would name. He said it reflected my mother's evolved wishes and superseded the prior attorney-drafted document. He argued the hearing should simply confirm its validity and move toward distribution. Then he called my uncle to testify. My uncle took the stand. He was calm, measured, confident. He described how my mother had approached him in the last year of her life with concerns about how the estate was structured. He said she had expressed that she felt the house should benefit the whole family, not just one person. He described the document as something she had written on her own, given to him for safekeeping, because she trusted him. He said she did not tell me because she did not want conflict. She wanted it handled after she was gone. He said all of this under oath. My attorney stood and asked if she could introduce exhibits. The judge nodded. She placed the first exhibit on the projector. It was my forensic analysis. All 12 pages, summarized into a single comparison slide. On the left, microphotograph of ink diffusion, from the forged will. On the right, microphotograph of ink from a document my mother had actually signed 14 months ago. The difference in lateral diffusion was visible to anyone in the room. She described it clearly. The ink in the purported will was consistent with writing performed 4 to 8 weeks before testing. The will was claimed to be 14 months old. The chemistry did not match the claim. The judge leaned forward. My attorney moved to Exhibit 2, a side-by-side signature comparison. 15 genuine signatures from my mother's actual legal documents spanning 12 years, annotated in red. The closed loop on the lowercase l. Every single genuine signature showed it. Then the forged will, the loop. open. The room was quiet in a way courtrooms rarely are. My uncle's attorney was on his feet, objecting to the methodology. The judge told him to sit down and let her review the materials. Then my attorney placed Exhibit 3. Daniel's financial timeline. $63,000 moved from my mother's account to my uncle's accounts over 10 years. Wire transfers labeled ambiguously. No loan documentation. No repayment records. A pattern of extraction from a woman who had spent 2 decades building the one asset they were now trying to claim. My uncle's face had gone from calm to something else. He was gripping the railing of the witness box. The judge looked at him. She asked him, clearly and directly, whether he had written the document himself or arranged for it to be written. He said no. She asked him whether he could produce the witnesses he had referenced who observed my mother sign this document. He said they were family friends. He said they were unavailable to testify in person but had provided written statements. She asked when those statements were prepared. He said recently, last month. She asked him to clarify whether these witnesses had been located and contacted after the probate filing, after my objection was filed, after the hearing was scheduled. He said yes. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she set down the exhibit and told both attorneys she would be recessing for 30 minutes to review the forensic analysis in full, before continuing. During the recess, my uncle approached me in the hallway. His attorney was behind him making small cautioning gestures that my uncle was ignoring. He told me I was making a mistake. He told me I was humiliating the family in public over a piece of property. He said my mother would be ashamed of what I was doing. I looked at him and said nothing for exactly 3 seconds. Then I told him that my mother had worked nights when I was in middle school to keep us from losing that house. I told him she had skipped her own dental appointments because the copay was $40 she didn't have. I told him I had found the records of every dollar she sent him when he asked, and that she had done it without ever once telling me because she was too proud to let me see how much his requests cost her. I told him she was not ashamed of me. She left me the house because she wanted me to be safe. He was not honoring her memory. He was robbing her corpse. He opened his mouth, then closed it, then walked away. When the judge returned, she made her ruling in 4 minutes. The holographic will was rejected. She found the forensic evidence of document fabrication credible and sufficient to disqualify the instrument. She noted that the financial records introduced as Exhibit 3 raised serious questions warranting referral to the district attorney's office for potential investigation into fraud and elder financial exploitation. She confirmed the original will as the valid governing document. The house was mine. The savings were mine. My uncle did not speak. My aunt started crying, quietly, in a way that might have looked like grief but that I recognized as something else entirely. Marcus had put his phone away. My attorney squeezed my arm and told me we were done. I walked out of that courtroom alone because I had driven myself there alone. The same way I had handled all of it, the forensic analysis, the document requests, the financial records, the preparation alone, the way my mother had handled most of her life. Quietly, methodically, without asking anyone to carry what she could carry herself. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a few minutes. I did not cry. I had cried at the hospital. I had cried at the funeral. I had done my grieving in the right places and at the right times, and I was not going to give what came next any more of my tears. I called Daniel and thanked him. He told me the DA referral was likely to move forward given the paper trail, and that financial elder abuse cases with this level of documentation tended to result in charges. I told him to send me his invoice and I would pay it from the estate immediately. Then I drove to 14 Elmridge Court and sat in the driveway for a while. It is a beige house, with a dark green door my mother repainted every 4 years even though no one asked her to. The gutters need cleaning. The third porch step has a soft spot she kept meaning to fix. In the garage there are 23 boxes of her things that I have not been able to open yet. 7 weeks after my uncle walked into her kitchen and slid a fraudulent deed across her table, the district attorney's office opened a formal investigation into document forgery, fraudulent probate filing, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The case is ongoing as of the time I am telling you this. I have submitted my full forensic analysis as a cooperating witness. I am not named as a complainant. The state is the complainant now. My uncle called me once after the hearing. I did not answer. I have not answered since. My aunt sent a letter that I read once and placed in a file folder without responding. Marcus sent a message through social media that I deleted without reading past the first line. I changed the locks. I repaired the porch step. I started opening the boxes in the garage, one at a time, on weekend mornings when I have coffee and nowhere to be. I found, in the third box, a folder of papers my mother had kept. Inside it was a copy of every wire transfer she had made to my uncle. She had kept them. She had documented every single one, quietly, in her own handwriting, on a yellow legal pad tucked behind the statements. Name, date, amount. No editorializing. Just the record. She knew. She had always known exactly what was happening. She just chose, her entire life, to absorb it, rather than name it. I do not know yet whether that was wisdom or something sadder than wisdom. I do not think I get to decide. What I know is that she left me the house because she wanted one thing in her life to be protected from the people who took things. She left it to me because she believed I would protect it. I did. The green door needs repainting this spring. I already bought the paint, the same color she always used. If you have ever inherited something that someone else immediately decided was theirs, leave me a comment. I want to know how far this story travels. And if you are somewhere right now holding a piece of paper someone wants you to sign before you have read it all the way through, put the pen down. Read every word. Then call a lawyer.